Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today. Okay, so again, this is all, folks, what we're talking about here today is all going to be in our version 24 of Church Windows. We still do not have a firm release date for the version 24 yet. We are hard at work on testing, wrapping up, adding some new things, adding things as needed to try to make sure that we have as complete and a quality software product for you released when that time comes. But I believe it's probably going to be sometime we're hoping within the next 2 to 4 weeks that's going to wind up occurring. Okay. So what we're here to talk about today is the verifying the tax setup in Payroll in version 24. Okay. So one of the things that we've been kind of on hold for about this is, as I had stated in one of our earlier webinars, is we're no longer going to be having an association or relationship with tax bandits in version 24 or after 2022. It will all be now with a company called Atrix, A-A-T-R-I-X, okay? So why this is important is while they will handle our electronic filing options in there, they're also going to be handling all of the actual tax documentations in Church Windows. So the good news about this, folks, is they're not going to handle just the federal tax documentations, but they're going to be able to handle all of the state documentation, all of your local tax documentation on that. All of that is going to be able to be handled by the Atrix from within Payroll. You should be able to handle, we're going to be able to print, yes, all of our other payroll reports are going to be here, but that we normally have, you know, the history reports and pay period deductions and pay period earnings. But Atrix is going to be able to handle virtually all of your tax documentation in the Church Windows or from the Church Windows Payroll in version 24. That is a fantastic step forward for you and for us, okay? When we're talking about the verification of the tax setup, we're talking about employees and contractors. So if I uncheck my contractors and I go into and I look at, say, all of my employees, and we're going to go here to this tab on the left-hand side, you'll see it's in yellow called tax, okay? And we have the 4 different tax tabs here: federal, state, local, and miscellaneous. You know, federal filing status, single married head of household. Head of household, folks, was only added since 2020 when the tax filing changed and use 2020 or later W-4 is selected here, okay? Anybody that had a completed W-4 from before 2020, nothing changes. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is when you check use 2020 or later W-4, notice now the option called exemptions goes away. It's all based on what employees enter on lines 2C, 3, 4A, or 4B on the W-4s that were issued of 2020 or later, okay? But you want to enter all of the information that's here based on what the employee has entered on their W-4. You should be obtaining and getting a W-4 form from every employee that is working for the church, okay? Including ministers or pastors, okay? They should be completing a W-4 as well for you, okay? So notice again, we've got our retirement plan down here. We've got our minister's self-employment tax. Again, only going to be checking the minister's SE tax box if the pastor wants you or has asked you to do that. And you're going to withhold federal taxes using the tax tables unless otherwise specified by the employee or the minister, okay? But again, it's literally what has the employee requested or specified on their W-4, okay? That's going to dictate what you enter under their federal tab. On the state tab, it's always going to be based on, excuse me here, folks, clear my throat, is based on your states, whatever state you choose as the withholding state, okay? So in Ohio, we happen to have one filing status called all. But if we go up to, say, another state, like maybe Connecticut here, notice there are 6, okay? So again, every state is different, but you want to make sure that you're choosing the appropriate or correct withholding state for your employees. You also want to make sure that's correctly selected for the church's information as well, okay? Again, you're responsible for checking this. and then entering the appropriate information. Most of the time, maybe some of, so I know some of you don't have state taxes, state income tax. Okay, so this is not in play for you. You'll have to bear with me while I go through this. Okay, but on virtually all of them, federal and state, here we have an additional amount or percent to be withheld. So if, say, an employee wants to have an additional $10 or a percent amount above and beyond the state tax tables, you can always enter that. Okay, use tax tables. Number of exemptions may be in play as well. And again, that may oftentimes mirror what the employee has specified on their federal W-4 form as well. And again, you would link your tax table, your state tax liability account there. Local taxes. Okay, again, maybe local taxes are not in play for some of you, but if it is, like there are here in Ohio, we've got to get those local taxes set up, and they're selected and entered here. Okay, you choose which account they're going to link to, and again, that's based on that. Miscellaneous state tax, if applicable. More and more of these states are implementing these. These are not, can't be categorized into necessarily a state tax or a local tax. It's kind of in a gray ground in the middle. Oftentimes that might be categorized or might fall into things like family medical leave or unemployment taxes where the state now is requiring, where maybe the state is now asking the employee to pay or pick up part of that expense for unemployment. Again, and I'm going to show an example here in just a minute when we go into that miscellaneous tax wizard to set that up, okay? But this is where this is all entered when those are set up for each of the employees, and they're subsequently linked to accounting as well, okay? When you make the entry, you simply click Save in the top right, and that information is saved to the employee file, okay? We did cover this briefly on our webinar on Tuesday with regards to allowances and deductions. But again, when we go into allowances and deductions, and this is a really important thing to understand, is the taxable status of an allowance or deductions is set up here, not under the employee file. That's what this include in W-2 wages box does. It's what the W-2 box code does, okay? One of the things that we're wanting to stress about in today's particular webinar event is when folks setting up allowances or deductions, do not set up multiple ones. Don't set one up for each employee, not one for the senior pastor and one for the associate pastor and one for the supply pastor, okay, or minister. Set up one. You don't need a housing allowance. The same taxable or tax requirements are going to be the same for all of your employees. The reason is it becomes, well, one, things you're stuck with once things get posted to them, and two, it's just you don't have to maintain them. You've got one to maintain if something changes with regards to its status, as opposed to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So keep this list simple. Do not add allowances or deductions based on the job title. Just call it housing. Just call it 403B pension. Don't call it 403B pension senior pastor. Don't and add another one for 403B, administrator. Just use one called general 403B pension. They're all going to show up with it's going to show up with box 12E, and it's going to be taxable for Social Security and Medicare for everybody. Or maybe local taxes. Okay, that might be the only way it might be considered different, was if you had some sort of different local, state, or local requirement for it. But typically, it's not going to be that way. Okay. So set up one deduction, one allowance for everybody. You don't need to set them up based on different employees. One of the things I did want to show here is, let me get another tab over here to show you. Let's go to our website. I think we got our homepage bookmarked here. Right here under our Resource Center, if I go right up here to Customer Support and Resource Center, I send this link to folks through my support calls all the time, folks, is right down here under Search. If I type in FAQs, notice right here we've got a really wonderful document called Payroll Setup FAQs, and it's a PDF document that really does talk about ministers, how a minister is defined, Social Security and SECA, independent employee versus independent contractors. Even goes so far down here, down at the bottom, it talks about the proper setup for allowances and deductions in terms of, what are they considered taxable for, which box box number do they belong in, and what's the respective code. So this is out here for you 24/7 should you need it. And it could, it's here if we're not here. And if you need further help, of course, you can call us, and our technicians, myself included, will be happy to help with that. Okay. Back into church windows here. I said I was going to talk before about here under, local tax, miscellaneous tax. So if we go to data setup here in the upper left, you've got miscellaneous tax versus local tax. Okay. Why this is important is because there's some things that are different about local taxes versus a miscellaneous tax. And one of the things about local taxes most of the time is that typically local taxes are based on two conditions. They're either a school district tax or a flat rate tax. So when I come into my local taxes and I click add, it now opens up my setup new local tax wizard. And you basically enter a description. Okay. Test, SD tax if it were a school district tax. Okay. And then here you enter abbreviation. You are required to choose the state. And then from there, you may even be required to choose a particular a state, and then from there you may even have to choose your local school district, as the case may be. There's a start date and an end date. End dates are not required. Active from is. The from date definitely is. If there's no end date entered, it's an active tax until you decide to enter that to date on that. Is there an account number that's going to be set up in accounting for that? And here again, folks, this is follow the bouncing ball. Okay. So basically, it's asking the question, is it a school district tax? Yes or no? So if you say no, then it's going to present different options than if you answer yes. Is the pastor's housing allowance subject to this tax? Again, yes or no. And then you simply click next. And it then opens up another window and says, which tax authority is this paid? City, county, other. Is this a flat rate tax? Okay. So that's because I said, is this a school district tax? No. So if I change that to yes and go to next, notice, what is the tax rate based on that school district tax? And is it based on state or local wages? Okay. So we could put in, let's say, 0.25. I mean, I'm just putting in an estimation here, and you go to next. And then it says finish. And then that allows you then to go into the employee file and set that up. Okay. Or assign that to there. There's my tax test school district tax. Okay. And just an explanation of, just like I said before, was when you do your miscellaneous taxes, it's very similar in terms of this, okay? We don't have this miscellaneous state tax in the state of Ohio, at least not yet, but they're popping up more and more around the country, and I'm going to show an example of this. If we click on add here, let's go ahead and say we're going to put in Oregon Transit Tax, okay? And let me get that consistent, capitalize that, and I'll call this OTT, okay? And once I choose Oregon, okay, over here to the right, notice Atrix, bless their hearts, is bringing in the various transit taxes that may be required, certainly with regards to the type of tax it is. So I would choose state transit tax. And again, I would enter the account number and go to next, and it pops up and asks me the same required question. Is the tax based on the number of hours worked? Is what's the total tax rate, and how much of that is paid by the employee? Okay. So I guess the bottom line about all of this with regards to any of the taxes, whether it's local or miscellaneous, is, folks, you've got to find out this information. Okay. Whether that means calling your local state Department of Taxation or Department of Revenue to get this information, or maybe you need to contact somebody at your local district or conference office. Okay. Somewhere the information is going to be available to you. We can only help you so far. Okay. You'll need to do some work to reach out to your local, state Department of Revenue or Taxation for the complete setup of what these should be. And you want to try to make sure that they're set up accurately the first time, if at all possible. They may always be edited. Okay. So if I go, okay, employee percentage is going to be 50%. And total tax rate would be 100. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is how this would work. okay? And then, so basically employee would be paying 50 and then the employer would be paying the other 50%, and it would be not based on hours worked. And we click next. Is there a limit to the amount that can be taxed? Okay, so again, depending on what you respond, opens up different options. If I say yes, is there a wage cap? Is there a tax cap? If I say no, notice it grays it out. Okay, now I don't know what Oregon's transit tax is. I'm just stating, though, that Atrix folks are, they're familiar with all of this stuff, and their software is doing and bringing in their information, is bringing in the information. You need to know and find out what the appropriate information is based on your local state, okay? And then you click next. And is there a W-2 box code? Is the minister's, again, housing allowance subject to this tax? And again, depending on what you respond, click next and then click finish. Okay. Oh, I submit that may be something we're still working on. It did add it. It wasn't fatal. So it did work. Okay. First error I've gotten on this. That's okay. I'll bring it to somebody's attention. So now when I want to add this with a couple minutes left, I would simply go into the employee file. I would choose my employee that I was wanting to add it for. Again, folks, we can kind of be pretty general about this with folks. And I can now go to the tax tab and go to either the local tax, okay, right here. And notice I've got all of my ones historically. Here's my test school district tax. And it'll say what date will it start. I could make this starting on January of 2023 if I want, okay? And so then that's there. And then it's based on that percentage I set up. Here I can choose my, my local or county. I think I've got a local tax in here. Forget what it is, sorry. City county tax payable, and I can enter an additional amount or percent amount withheld if I want. Again, must save. And same thing for my miscellaneous tax. I have to go into each one of my employees and choose that to assign that. That's where that error may have come into play, folks, is that Oregon transit tax isn't here. Or maybe my employee, because they're not set up with the state of Oregon, it detects that it's already not available, or it doesn't qualify for those folks to be there with regards to that, because I don't have them. I guess maybe I would have to go to my HR. Maybe let's try changing that maybe to, can I do that? I think I can. Let's do that. Let's try changing this here to Oregon. And we only got a couple minutes here, folks. So let me see if that becomes available here. So now under the save, now I want to go to the tax tab. Let's see if that shows up. It may not. Nope, it doesn't. So it had something to do with the error I got there, but we'll get that fixed up here quickly. All right, folks, it's 20 minutes after the hour. We're going to go ahead and see. Okay, so while we're waiting for questions to pop in here, I'm going to go back and review those momentarily. Folks, you may always, the final thing I'm going to say about this is you may always run a mock payroll and look and see what the net pay is going to be, what the taxes are going to be withheld when you go to calculate payroll. And we're going to discard that. So we'll make this one for October 14th. Next, pay period ended. We'll make it the same thing. Next, and oh, it's not letting me do it based on the data that I've got entered. You get to that window where it says browse calculations, folks. It allows you to look at that pay and see exactly what the net pay will be for folks, what their taxes are going to be withheld, not posting anything. You can cancel out of it, no harm, no foul, without posting anything. Look for that browse calculations button on your calculate payroll wizard here to be able to see that. And you can look at that, cancel out of it, everything's good, make changes, run it again. Don't need to post to see it. Finally, please advise your employees to check their pay stubs earlier in the year. We get all kinds of calls from churches saying, my employee came to me in September, October, and they're telling me that no federal income tax has been withheld from their tax. And, and the first thing I think is, well, is this really the first time that the employee's been looking at their paycheck throughout the year? Okay? Advise them. Please, tax tables have changed, either state or federal level. I think we've already been notified we're going to get tax table changes in 2023. So, tax rates change for employees, okay? Change rates, and so taxes change. So advise your folks and employees to check their paychecks in the first, couple of paychecks of 2023. So, if there's any issues that they have, that you can address that earlier so they don't get into trouble. So, okay? So just advise your employees to check their pay stubs earlier in the year. Don't wait. okay? Gives you the chance to get things fixed up sooner rather than later, okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave that there.